This first piece actually started out as something in my nonfiction workshop last fall, and it kind of evolved into this. And since my siblings will probably be watching this video on YouTube once it's up, I just want to say don't take it personal. It's creative nonfiction. But this one's called Conversations with My Mother, and my mother's Nigerian. She has a Nigerian accent, and I'll just do it for the first line. I'm not that great at it, so just the first line, I'm not going to carry it through. Jennifer, do you hear it? I remember I used to hear it all the time, the first time I left home. I would wake up to it, panicked, thinking she was waiting on me. What? I'd shoot up straight out of my bed, slightly disoriented, looking for her. And then I would remember she wasn't there. She couldn't be. I wasn't home. When my mother left me at the dorm, she had that look on her face, one that seemed to say she wasn't sure about any of this. She wasn't sure I could make do without her. I hated that look. She wore the same look when I was 17. I was taking my driver's test. I had just learned to parallel park the day before, and it was with a completely different car than the one I'd been using for the test. I sat trembling in a tattered seat in PennDOT, part because I was nervous, the other part because it was so cold in there. And while I sat, my mother kept repeating, "It's okay if you fail. You can retake it. You'll have 2 more chances after this one." When I had passed to the good graces of the driving gods, I remember telling my mother. I was so happy and elated, especially since my mother had been convinced I didn't have a chance. "I passed, Mom. I thought I'd fail because I'd felt the tire hit the curb when I was parallel parking, but the instructor helped me through it and I passed." I had wanted her to break out into a smile, to congratulate me and tell me I did a good job, but instead she shrugged and said, "You should have failed. You're lucky he passed you." That sucked the air out of it, similar to the time after I graduated from college. After a string of fall-through interviews, I finally got a bite, an awesome interview that led to an offer. I was excited and wanted to share the news. I phoned my mother up and told her, "Mom, I got a job." "How much does it pay?" she had asked. Not what kind of job is it, or where will you be working. 12 an hour. Is that all? It seemed plenty to me. It was more than I'd ever made before, but my mother wasn't impressed, and all at once, neither was I. It was then that I learned never to share good news with my mother anymore. My father was always so easy to impress. All I would have to do was so much as wink at him, and he was in the palm of my hand. My mother was always more of an arm's reach. I remember when we had taken a family picture once when I was 4. It was before my little brother had been born, and I was still the youngest. My sister and my 2 brothers had taken the last seats in front of the gray-blue background, and there wasn't one left for me. I went to my mother wanting her to pick me up and put me on her lap. She didn't. She told me, "Stay there," as I stood in front of her stool, still hoping she'd pick me up. She never did. Being close to my mother was always so difficult. I'd only seen my mother's pregnant belly once when it was full with my little brother. I'd sit and watch her rub it, and once she told me she felt him kicking. "Come feel," she said. I placed my cheek against her belly, knelt up next to her, waiting to feel it too. Try as I might have, I never once felt the kick. "Did you feel it?" My mother's eyes met mine, and I nodded back. When I was that young, I was convinced my little brother was my mother's favorite. She'd tell the story about how odd she was about being pregnant again until having this dream. In the dream, I was in the car, and there was this little boy in the back seat. I was upset and worried, but this boy, he sat back there smiling at me. When I woke, I felt better. I wasn't worried or upset anymore. I knew things would be okay. It was a special story that made my brother sound like a miracle baby. My mother always lit up when she told that story, so I had asked her once what had happened when she had me. "You? Things were very bad when you were born. Your dad and I weren't working. It was the worst possible time. You were a breech baby." I held on to being breech because it sounded special. I soon learned it wasn't. My mother elaborated in the story through the years. "You were laying in the wrong position. You didn't flip until the last second, and the umbilical cord wrapped around your neck. You weren't breathing when you came out. There were many times after finding that out I wondered or wished that umbilical cord had actually strangled me, that I had never stopped not breathing." The day I told my mother that I didn't want to go back to school to become a lawyer, I remember being so desperate. She had thought I had lied to her about something. "When did you decide this?" she said. "I've always known," I said. "I just never pursued it because I wanted to do what you wanted for me. I just wanted to make you proud of me. What have you ever done to make me proud? Remembering those words still chafes an old wound. Then it made me think, why did I breathe? Why didn't I just let that cord strangle me? I wanted to stop breathing when I felt the shakes and tremors come on from my silent tears that were too painful to have a voice in the form of any kind of wailing. That's what happens when my mother and I get into an argument, because only she has the effortless precision to cut so deep. Merciless. We aren't friends, I said to my mother about a year ago. I shouldn't have said those words, though I meant them. But as soon as the words were out, I could see how I had cut her deep with a merciless touch, but I couldn't take the words back. Don't you know that I love you so much? The time that I was pregnant with you, I worked in the factory. It was so hot. I nearly lost you. I worked, even without papers, hoping to bring something for you. And it wasn't that I didn't know of the sacrifices she had made, not that I didn't appreciate how hard she worked. Everything comes with a cost. It was visible in how little she knew of me outside of how old I was and my favorite color. The concerts or sporting events she missed because she was tired or needed to go to exercise. The things she didn't share. The things I wouldn't share. I tell my mother confidently now, I want to write, because she'll still ask me from time to time, why not you do this program? You can go overseas, get this degree in law, come back over and practice. And I shake my head because there still exists this pit between us, where my sound waves end up instead of reaching her ears. And even with all my confidence, my bravado, my belief that I'm stronger and surer than I once was, my mother still has a sniper's shot with her words, and the tears come back. They never really go away because I am a bottle that's apt to filling, and once I fill up, I overflow. Not like my mother, who can fill and fill and fill into a bottomless pit whose spillover point is so imperceptible you'd swear it's hardly there at all. In my 27 years, I saw my mother cry only once. It wasn't when her mother passed, the pain of which was so intense and raw she couldn't look at a picture of her for many months after. It wasn't when she had discovered that her husband of then 25 years had been stepping out philanderously on the side. It was on Mother's Day, 7 years ago, when I had come home last minute to throw her a surprise with my two brothers, with cake and inexpensive gifts we had thrown together. She had tears in her eyes and declared, God is good. Thank you. Okay, and so this next piece is a fiction piece. It's pretty fresh, so I don't really know what to make of it. No dialogue, all non-dialogue, so whatever you want to call that. And this one's called Invisible Spaces. She was falling. I saw her hair wrap around her and twist and tangle and strangle. The collapse was like crunching leaves, a floral exchange of just reds, falling down. The way I knew her was in the blue sundress that she would wear when she came to the park. She was rumpled looking with wild hair, like her dress was fished straight from the laundry basket, like she could just as easily have been wearing no shoes. And I watched her from my bench that was far enough away to be invisible, but close enough to see the red highlights in her hair and hear the clacking of her shoes and smell the dryer sheets that would sometimes still be inexplicably caught to her bottom, and feel the same wind that was hitting her face too. And I thought how awkward she was, the way she would skim the water in the fountain with her fingers and pick out brown fallen leaves that had wilted and grown soggy. She'd flick them and tear them apart and sometimes sniff them, maybe hoping to discover a hidden secret. And then we crossed past the days she was flopping around, chasing a hyper frog who was slippery and elusive. And she called to me to please help her, but she needed to catch him because the frog was decidedly a him, and most certainly not an it. So I jumped up and flopped around and probably looked silly trying to bag this frog, who was oily and had no grip. When we both sprang up to grab him and simultaneously missed him, we landed face down across him from each other, graying dandelions as our bed. I looked up to her, looking at me. I could see that her face was freckled, a detail I couldn't have gathered from my invisible distance. Her face flushed, and she began laughing. And then I began laughing. The frog, whose name soon became Guinea, landed in front of us, an offering and a suggestion that the three of us should never separate. And so we met regularly because Guinea demanded it. It was at these meetings that the wild-haired girl, whose name I soon learned was Mir, would regale me with Guinea's special talents. Her innate ability to jump higher than the average frog. His communicable chirping, which Mir claimed to hear over the perceptible ribbit I always heard. There was also the fact that Mir said his head was shaped like a star she had seen in a dream one night. And because she had dreamt it and he was here, that had to mean something. She would ask me at the end of all this if I found her strange, and the truth was that I found her incredibly odd. While impossibly charming in none of this, I said to her, as I shook my head and waved while asking her if we should do this again the next day. To this she would vigorously nod her head wildly and light up the sun with her smile and wave back to me. And what I had regretted most of all is there was a time that Mir had been teaching me. We had been observing Guinea's hind legs and the mysterious freckles that had sprouted overnight all over them, and I couldn't decide if it was a miracle or commonplace, as I couldn't remember if Guinea had had freckles. I knew Mir's freckles, and I remember the bow she had knotted in her hair the day before that I couldn't take my eyes off of. I saw a leaf had grazed her lips, and I moved in to remove it, caught stuck to the corner of her mouth. So close I couldn't help but try and steal a taste, but she'd moved away, claiming that she couldn't now because she was far too young, and hoped to wait till she was older. She laughed nervously, saying she'd read the line in a book once and always wanted to try it on. And I laughed too, pretending I was nervous, too, and didn't mean any of it. When we parted that day, I didn't think that would be the only chance that I'd get, that Mir would never be old enough for me to kiss, and I'd never be less foolish. I don't get to visit Mir by the fountain anymore, to watch her from an invisible distance. Only at night when my eyes are shut. I sometimes see her falling, sometimes I'm just helplessly watching, invisible. Other times I'm there with her, trying and failing to catch her. Her hair runs through my fingers. Other times she isn't falling at all. A careless trip face down into the fountain. She doesn't move. Guinea hops by frantically. When my eyes are open, I wonder why I never once walked her home, asked where she lived, offered my name. Why I never once saw her again, heard from her, heard of her. It was then that I receded back into my invisible distance and questioned what was visible. Thank you. And so, since those last two were kind of somber, I decided to send you off laughing. So this one's a funnier piece. And since everybody knows a good fart joke or a dick joke, I figured that nobody makes enough jokes about female parts. So this one's called Oreos and Areolas. So what's this about, Crystal? I dabbed my finger at what was left of my whipped topping that topped a sinfully calorific hot fudge brownie. Crystal's treat, of course. Treat for what, I hadn't figured out yet. Not that I mind a free meal, it's just that I can't help but feel like maybe someone died or is about to die and you need me to hide the body. Don't be so morbid, Steffi. It's not like that. It's just that I need to ask you a favor. My longest and oldest friend, Crystal Daniels, is the only one who still calls me Steffi, and when she needs to ask me a favor, I know it's going to be for something ridiculous. Go ahead, ask. I've already been calorie guilted. Now, before I ask, I'm going to need you to remember something. Do you remember Cory Trent? That guy who played the tuba in the band? The one with the nose? Because, of course, there was also Corey Handler, the one with the hair, and Cory Trent, the one with the toes, which I could explain, but you'd have to have been there for that one. Yes, that Cory. Do you remember when I almost lost my virginity to him freshman year? I remember you complaining about the grass stain you got from lying on your back behind the bleachers. You bitched about that for about a week. Focus, Steffi, this is serious. She had her I mean business face on, which usually meant she meant business, or needed to pass gas and was trying to divert focus by wearing her I mean business face. I'm not completely sold on which side of the line she's falling on today. Go ahead, Crystal, so what about Cory? So I don't like to talk about, about what happened when we almost... Crystal paused to move in and whispered, had relations. I rolled my eyes. You mean had sex? Steffi! Crystal looked around to make sure we hadn't caught anyone's eyes. Don't be so loud and vulgar. Crystal, if we're old enough to have it, it can't be vulgar. Besides, there are about 1 million words I could have said that are far more vulgar than sex. I know, it's just, you know how I feel about that word. Crystal, ever the prude. Well, anyway, remember what happened when we tried, right? No idea. Steffi! What? Crystal, that was 10 years ago. I can't be expected to keep a biographical account of every single thing you do. This wasn't just something. This is something I've had to deal with every day of my life since. It's been scarring. Just what could Cory with the nose have done to scar you for life? Truth be told, Cory with the nose was likely the least threatening of the three Corys. Now, Cory with the toes was the one you might have wanted to keep a lookout for, but again, you would have had to have been there to be clued into why. It's what he said, Steffi, don't you remember? My blank stare told her, no. I can't believe you forgot. Crystal moved in closer and lowered her voice. He said they looked like pancakes. My blank stare told her, go on, but I guess this one got lost in translation. What looked like pancakes? You know. Crystal, I'm not a fucking mind reader. Crystal let out a sigh. Steffi, sometimes you're making this so hard. Dropping her voice even lower, Crystal mumbled something. What? Now she was wearing her nervous and unfrustrated face. It could have also been her I need to pee face, but I'm fairly certain it was the first one. She mumbled something again, and I could just barely catch something. Huh? Oreos? Oh, for crying out loud, Steffi, not Oreos, Areolas. Areolas, for Christ's sake. Now everyone was looking at us, because of course, Crystal looked incredibly crazy screaming about areolas. Her face flushed a deep color of red velvet. How I could go for some red velvet cake. Cory said your areolas looked like pancakes? I stifled back a laugh. It's not funny, Steffi. Actually, Crystal, it kind of is. It's kind of super fucking hilarious. You don't get it, Steffi. After I revealed myself to him, he laughed for 5 minutes straight because of how big and dark they were. He said they looked like pancakes with a tiny dollop of butter on top. I was so mortified I ran away before we could go any farther. It's haunted me ever since. I refuse to get intimate with a guy with the lights on. If I can get away with not taking off my bra, it's a relief. Do you see how this has taken over my life? Not so funny now, is it? Crystal, ever the drama queen. Nope, still funny. Crystal was wearing her I'm glaring at you face as she glared at me. Hard. Don't be mad, I'm just surprised you've let this take over your life like this. It's a little silly if you think about it. Well, it's not silly to me. It has taken over my life. I've decided to do something about it. So what are you going to do? Go to therapy or something? Areolas Anonymous? Steffi! I let out a laugh. She makes this so easy. Okay, so what are you going to do? I booked an appointment. I'll be getting surgery. Surgery? What kind of surgery? It's purely cosmetic, but it will make me feel better about, my situation. What is it? Areola lightening surgery. Come again? It's all the rage in Asia. They go in and lighten your areolas. For me, it'll be a bit different, though. They'll be lightening some of the skin around my areolas so it matches the skin of the rest of my breasts. It'll be like they're surgically shrinking them. You're kidding. I'm serious, Steffi. I'll finally have my life back. She clasped my hands in hers. It was like she had witnessed a miracle. Well, if this is what you want, then I'm happy for you. Good for you, Crystal. Go get your life. Crystal should get her life, and unless another hot fudge brownie was going to materialize on my plate, we should get the check. I knew you would be happy for me, Steffi. That's why I wanted to ask you this favor. That's right, you wanted to ask me a favor. That's why you're bribing me with sweets. So what is it? As my best friend, it would mean the world to me if you could come with me to my surgery. Really, Crystal? I'm sure you'll be fine. I couldn't imagine there was much of a history in botched areola surgeries. Please, Steffi, anything could happen. Just think about it. What if the surgeon decides to have an off day and forgets to sterilize his instruments and I wind up with AIDS or hepatitis or cancer? Crystal, you cannot catch cancer from unclean utensils. AIDS and hepatitis, sure, but not cancer. That's not the point. The point is I'd feel so much safer and more secure if you were there. I let out a sigh. Okay, well, when is it? Friday, 2 p.m. I'd have to leave Kingman's early. Who knows if they'll let me? Oh, you just have to come. You can tell them you're attending Geraldine's funeral. Christ, Crystal, why would you wish death on your dog? She's been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. She's got one paw in the grave as it is. I can't be responsible for her life choices, Steffi. Life choices, Crystal, you're the one who feeds her. Steffi, I just can't deal with semantics right now. Are you going to come or not? She was staring back at me with her puppy dog eyes, not unlike the ones Geraldine would give Crystal right before Crystal would cave and slip her a little bit of some bacon. Yeah, I'll come. It's not like number one checkout girl at Kingman's doesn't give me some pull. Steffi, you're a real friend. Crystal started to wave down a waitress to get the check, but I stopped her. Wait, we're not done yet. What is it? Well, this calls for a celebration. Oreo milkshakes on me to commemorate your new areolas. I was wearing my Cheshire grin because she knew I just had to. You know, Steffi, you're a real jerk.